I have used Universal Audio Apollo interfaces for recording for over 10 years now. It's been over a decade on Apollos. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why we use Apollos here at Worship Tutorials. Bradford uses them as well, why we've been with them for so long, what is so appealing about them to us, and what you get with the new Gen 2 Apollos that Universal Audio has just brought out onto the market. I've been asked over and over again on the internet, what kind of audio interface do you use? What do you recommend? And the answer for me is always easy. We love Apollos. Now, recently we've partnered with Universal Audio quite a bit to talk about their amp sim pedals, talk about their effects pedals, and now for this new Gen 2 interface. But I've been using Apollos since 2014. That's over 10 years. And I actually bought that first Apollo used, so I don't even know how old that thing is. And I think Bradford still might have it. It's still going strong. So yeah, like I said in this video, I'm gonna really go through some of the key reasons why I love using Universal Audio Apollos. There are many great interfaces on the market that you can get into, but I think the Universal Audio line is so solid and has so many entry points. It makes it a strong contender if you're looking for an interface to get started with or to build something big and more professional. The UA Apollos can do it for you. When I very first started in recording, this would have been like 1999 or so, there weren't very many options on the market. There was an M Audio, what was it? It was M Audio, I'm pretty sure it was M Audio, something 44. It was like a PCI card that had like this breakout box with 4 line inputs. These are early days. And I think it came with Cubase, something like that. Anyway, that's what I got started in college in 1999. So 26 years ago, 25 years ago. From there, I remember the first real, like, you know, what I thought was a huge upgrade. I got a PreSonus FirePod. How many FirePod users are there out there? Let us know in the comments. I use the FirePod, so the early days of Worship Tutorials, this has been like 2008, would have been all done on the FirePod. I used the FirePod. I used Cubase with the software that came with it. And I started learning about these interfaces made by Universal Audio called Apollos. And originally, it was the Apollo Twin for me. I think they had other, things in the lineup back then in like 2014 when I got my first Apollo. But there were a few things that really intrigued me about the Apollo. One thing I was dealing with a lot was latency. So I would try to record. Back then I did a lot of acoustic and vocal recordings. We still do that here on the channel, but I did a lot of like acoustic song covers and tutorial videos, and I would run into latency all the time. Of course, back then computers are very different than what they are today, but even now you deal with latency. It's a huge consideration, a huge factor when you're doing any kind of home recording. So the Apollos had DSP chips built into them, so they would run the plugins or run effects on the unit itself. This is an Apollo Twin, so there are DSP chips built into this interface that will run their plugins, and they run them in real time. So you could record through their plugins, and they made awesome plugins, which is part of, we'll talk about that in a bit. You could record through their plugins in real time. You could hear EQ, compression, reverb, all that kind of stuff, and it would lay it down with no latency. And that was really intriguing to me. So in 2014, I bought a used Universal Audio Apollo, and the individual that I bought it from had owned a few plugins, some plugins that I still use to this day, like the Ocean Way Studios plugin was one of them. And so those transferred to my account, and I had a taste of the glory. Don't you want a taste of the glory? See what it tastes like. And I did. And I loved it. So I was hooked. And, over time I would buy more plugins, but I had that Apollo Twin. I think it had 1 or 2 DSP chips in it. So it couldn't run a ton of effects, but it could run enough that like I could put EQ, compression, and maybe a reverb on a bus or something. and track through that when I would do acoustic song playthroughs. So that's point number one, why I love Apollo interfaces and why I use them here at Worship Tutorials, is the no latency monitoring that you can get and the sound quality that you get with them. So these Apollos feature something called unison preamps. They've had this in their lineup. If you don't know what unison preamps are, there's a ton of information on them. What they do is they are preamps that digitally and in a way physically model classic preamps. Like this right here is a Neve 1073 preamp. This Apollo Twin has two unison preamps that you can set to emulate this Neve 1073 preamp. It works in tandem with the Neve 1073 plugin that Universal Audio makes. So you pop that into the unison slot and you actually can hear some clicks changing. So the actual circuitry, the physical circuitry of the preamps will change depending on the type of preamp that you're trying to emulate. So that was something that my PreSonus FirePod could not do. And it was very intriguing to me because I was just learning about like classic analog hardware, and I wasn't able to afford something like a Neve 1073, but I could emulate it on my Apollo 10 years ago in 2014, and I did. And you can get SSL. They make all kinds of plugins that emulate classic designs. Some of them you get for free. You get an excellent one for free when you buy into the system, and I actually have one. It's their 610 preamp. So you can load the 610 Unison plugin in the Unison slot in the software. We'll talk about that in a bit too. That comes in the Apollo, and now your Apollo Twin sitting on your desk sounds just like a 610 preamp, which is a much more expensive analog hardware preamp. So the sound quality, the plugins, the zero latency, that was all super intriguing to me, and I still use it daily when I use these Apollos. And you can basically emulate a 48 channel, SSL desk if you want to. You can put that SSL channel strip preamp setting on every channel of your Apollo setup, and it's like you're tracking through an SSL preamp. Now, does it sound just like the analog hardware? It's pretty close. I've done a lot of tests specifically between the Apollo Unison preamp with the plugin and my Neve 1073. I spent a lot of money on that Neve 1073, and I remember Bradford and I did a test where we set the plugin exactly like the preamp. We recorded something through both at the same time, and we A/B'd them, and a bit of buyer's remorse on the Neve because the plugin sounded almost exactly the same. I still love the hardware preamps and Universal Audio. I mean, they make the hardware preamps. They make the 610s. They make 1176s, but they also make the digital emulations of those in plugin form. So you can kind of get, they're not saying that this replaces that, but they're saying you can get the sound of this classic hardware in your digital audio interface. So point one, I love the way they sound. I love the plugin infrastructure that's built into it and the way that the plugins run on the hardware. So point number two, the reason why I love UA Apollos is the scalability. So I mentioned I started with a Twin over 10 years ago, back in 2014. I got into the system on the Twin, and I quickly needed more channels. And as we've grown here, one of the things that I have always wanted to do is have all of the modeling units that we make presets for, the Helix, the AXFX3, the FM9, the Kemper, the Quad Cortex, what else is there? There's all kind of stuff around here. The HX Stomp. I wanted all of that stuff all lined in at the exact same time so that I could play my guitar through any of them without like moving cables around. So each of those are stereo devices. So you've got Helix, HX Stomp, AXFX3, FM3, FM9, Kemper, Quad Cortex. That's 14 channels that I needed preamps in order to set this up. So my little Twin interface can do 2. I needed I needed 12 more. So I didn't have to upgrade my twin. What I was able to do is I bought an Apollo 8. That Apollo 8, that first one that I bought, I just took it out of my system this many years later. That thing is still going strong and it still sounds great. And that gave me 8 more inputs. So I would have 4 mic preamps with the Apollo 8 and then 4 line ins. So now I had 2 plus 8. I had 10. Eventually, I added another Apollo, an Apollo 8P. So now I had 8 plus 8 plus 2. Then I added an ADAT interface, a Behringer ADA 8000, I think is what it's called, or ADA 800. Anyway, it's a Behringer mic preamp strip that goes ADAT into any of those Apollo interfaces. They all have ADAT in. It adds 8 more. So now I was up to 8 inputs on the Behringer, 8 inputs on the 8P, 8 inputs on the 8, and then 2 inputs on the twin. And finally, I wanted more because I wanted to be able to have all this stuff set up at the same time. Granted, this is overkill and a very, very niche specific setup that I wanted to have all these modeling interfaces plugged in at the same time. But today, what I have is 3 Apollo 8Ps. So one of them is here. I have 2 more in the rack over here. So each of those have 8 preamps built into them. I have 2 preamps on the twin. So now we're up to 8, 16, 24, 25, 26, and I have an 8-channel ADAT preamp. So I have 32 preamp inputs that I want. And of course I have some outboard preamps that I have lined into some of these things. Like I've got the Neve 1073 DPX, that's 2 channels of preamp, and I have the UA 610, that's another preamp. So those would replace 3 of the Unison preamps that I have available. I just go into the line in. But the point is, the Apollo system was able to scale up with my needs. And none of the hardware that I had started on became obsolete. All of it was integrated into the same system, and all of it became useful to me. I didn't have to like sell my twin and buy an 8, because they wouldn't be compatible with each other. I was able to upgrade over time as my needs got bigger and bigger. So you can buy one of the smaller interfaces to start with if you don't need a ton of channels. They've got interfaces that have 2 inputs. They've got with 4, 8, and then up you can get the 16. If you want that, if you've got a lot of outboard preamps, you can go into the 16. So the scalability was a huge factor, and it was one of the reasons that I knew early on that the Apollo system was going to work for me, because I could see in the future, like, I might need a lot more inputs. And I've also done full band recordings here at the studio, and we used the Apollos, and we were able to put, 8 mics on drums, 2 stereo guitars, acoustic guitar, bass, and stereo keys, and it was no sweat. And I could run all of these interfaces now have DSP chips in them, so I could run tons of plugins in real time hosted on the Apollo interfaces. Everyone had their own channel strip with all the EQ, compression, outboard effects that they would want virtually through the software, and it all happened seamlessly and it sounded great. So I love the scalability of the Apollo line. Finally, the functionality that Universal Audio builds into these interfaces is pretty amazing. I've been talking about it here and there throughout the video with the plugins. I've got the console software up, so they have a piece of software that runs on your computer that interfaces with all of your interfaces. Interfaces with your interfaces. Did I mean to do that? Well, it happened. So basically what it is it allows you to, whether you have a single twin, you have an X4, I think it's called an X4, or you've got 4 Apollos all daisy chained together via Thunderbolt, you set it all up in the console software and you can run, this is where you can host all your plugins. Of course, you can do it in the DAW that you choose to use as well. But if you do it in here, these plugins are going to then run on the DSP chips on the Apollos, and you can set up monitor mixes, you can set Q outputs. I do all kinds of crazy routing with this thing using the outputs of all these interfaces. I route the outputs like all when we do a demo for a preset, one of the things we do is we run it into the Helix. Helix goes into the Apollos. Then I use outputs of the Apollos to run all the way across the room to FR speakers. I love the Fender FR speakers, by the way. And we plug them into the FR speakers, and then they're sitting like this, so we have a stereo, it's like you're sitting in front of two stereo amplifiers playing back. And it's a great way to do it, but it's all made possible with the routing that you can get inside of this software. And of course, there are lots of high quality interfaces on the market, and they all offer their own software, routing setup kind of thing. But the Universal Audio one, they keep adding functionality to it. This is a very, very robust piece of software that allows you to do lots and lots of different things. And if you use their absolutely free Luna recording software, it all integrates together. So you open a recording session up, and it's just, it interfaces with your Apollos, and you can recall channel strips and things like that. Very, very tight integration. I've been experimenting with Luna quite a bit, and I really like the software. This isn't a video about Luna, but if you do get into the Apollo interfaces, that you get a really, really good DAW, digital audio workstation, with it in Luna. So finally, I want to talk about the Gen 2 interfaces. I have two of the Gen 2 interfaces. I have the Gen 2 X8P, and then this is a Gen 2 Apollo Twin X. So Gen 2 gives you a couple really nice upgrades from the original Gen 1 interfaces. The first thing that you get has to do with sound quality. So in the original Apollo lineup, they had the Twin, the 8, the 8P, then they went to the X8P. So they basically they scale up as far as how many preamps you get, how many inputs. The top of the lineup, and still what is the top of the lineup, is the 16. So the 16 was unique in the original lineup is in that it had higher quality ADDA conversion. So what that means is when you say you're going to record a vocal, you put a microphone and plug it into your interface. Well, a microphone is an analog piece of hardware. And that analog piece of hardware, once that signal gets to whatever your recording interface is, it is converted from analog to digital. So that's AD conversion. The quality of that conversion is one of the biggest pieces that will determine what the quality of the overall sound is. You've got the microphone itself. Well, first you have the singer. Then you've got the microphone itself, then the preamp that you're running the microphone into, and then you've got the analog to digital conversion. All three of those things are super important when it comes to the quality of the recording that is made once it gets into the computer. So the original Apollos have really good sounding analog to digital conversion. The converters in there are super high quality, but the 16 had the highest quality analog to digital conversion, and none of the other Apollos in the lineup had that quality of converters in it. Now, the new Gen 2 lineup, all of the Apollos have that super high quality conversion that was previously only found in the 16. So now with the entire lineup, Twin all the way up to 16, you've got that ultra high quality conversion. Another thing that you get on the Gen 2 is room correction built in. So we often tell people when it comes to I want to set up a recording studio in my spare bedroom or basement or whatever, one of the main things you're going to want to address is your room itself. And I have spent a lot of time and effort and money treating this room. There's all kinds of sound treatment around. There's a cloud above me. All of it in an effort to take the room out of the equation when it comes to mixing sound. If you don't have a treated room, it can really affect what you're hearing when you're starting to mix. You can have buildup of frequencies. You can have dips in frequencies. It's the reason why if you record like something in your bedroom and you mix it and it sounds awesome coming out of your monitors and you go listen to it in your car, it sounds terrible. It's because your room isn't treated right. So there is software out there that has existed for a while called SonarWorks. What SonarWorks does is you get like a reference microphone and you basically record sweeps. And this is actually what I did. I hired a professional I did sweeps of the room and then I sent those to him. He analyzed those sweeps, 3D modeled the room itself, and then designed the treatment around it. Okay. I understand not everybody is going to go that route because it's time consuming, it's expensive. You got to put all kinds of stuff on your walls and you might not be able to do that. What SonarWorks does is they give you a reference microphone and you record those sweeps. And then in software, it corrects for the dips and the peaks and all of the issues you might have in your room. Now, I've used the SonarWorks stuff before, and it was kind of a headache because it was just another layer of software that had to be running at all times whenever you would use whenever you would go to mix something. You had to have the SonarWorks software up because then it would lay on top of what came out of your speakers. It was a bit cumbersome. With the new Gen 2 update of these Apollos, that is now built into and is hardware accelerated with these interfaces. So you can do the same thing. You get the microphone, you do the sweeps, it analyzes your room, it then corrects for your room, and it gives you two options, which is really cool. One is what it puts on your main monitors. So you have a room correction that's meant for, the acoustic physical space in your room, and also it corrects for headphones. So SonarWorks has a vast library where they have taken many sets of popular mixing headphones and they've created profiles based on those headphones, and then they will correct those headphones to make it a flat response. So I have a handful of headphones that I use and they're all in the SonarWorks software. So I can then just with the click of a button right here, I can turn the headphone correction on if I'm mixing on headphones and I want to hear it flat. And then I can turn the monitor correction on where even this room, as treated as it is, it still has, it's not perfect. So the SonarWorks software can help perfect it, if you will. And it's all built into the Apollo. You don't have to have like this separate thing that runs in between. Is it on? Did I turn it on? Did I turn it off? I ran into that a lot when I originally used it. So it's a super handy feature and it runs on the chips built into the Apollos. So if you're asking yourself, what kind of recording interface do I want to get started with? If you're wanting to just make some recordings at home recording has been one of the most enjoyable things that I have. It started as a hobby and I loved it so much, even if it was for my own, personal enjoyment, not for making it to put on the internet. It's just a lot of fun. If you want to write songs, if you want to write instrumental pieces, if you have like a Helix, granted the Helix can be used as an interface itself, but if you want to kind of step things up a little bit, run the Helix into something, get something you can put, plug in a keyboard into or plug a microphone into, that kind of thing, record some vocals. And you're thinking, what do I want to do? The Universal Audio Apollo line has so many options for you to jump into it that gives you so much scalability in the future. It's a really great system. I really love it. They have more budget-friendly options as well. You can get into their Volt interfaces, which are very affordable, but still really high quality. I remember, if you remember Fuller, used to be on the channel quite a bit. My old boss, my old mentor, one of my best friends in the world, he uses Apollos as well. He wanted something smaller that he could take with him, like a more mobile thing. And he chose to go with a Volt. They're bus powered, so you just power them over USB. I think some of them are. And he would tell me all the time, he's like, I just record on the Volt half the time. It sounds so good. They have built-in like compression and stuff set in the Volt interfaces. So even their super affordable line still is really, really high quality stuff. It'll give you a taste though for the Apollo stuff, and you might find yourself upgrading eventually. But Universal Audio it's been wonderful to have this relationship with UA. thank you to Universal Audio for partnering together with us, but also just thank you for making such awesome stuff. Like I said, I've been using Apollo interfaces years and years and years and years before we ever began a partnership with the company. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, we encourage you to do so you don't miss content like this, all the other types of content that we upload here to YouTube. Click the bell so you can be notified when new uploads go up. We'll see you in the next one.